Hello, it's Deborah from the attic, and today I have the latest Tonic craft kit to show you. This is craft kit number 22. Everything is always beautifully curated so that it matches, and I hope you can see the selection of papers and cardstock that you get here. Everything from glitter through to a shimmery effect on cardstock, and then buff cardstock as well. These are some of the extra elements that you always get in these kits. They're always absolutely packed with loads of good value products. There's an embossing pad. This is called Clear Mark. So this is a clear embossing pad to be used with embossing powder. There is a little embossing powder included. This is called Shimmering Pearl. There is an embellishment mousse. This one is called Pure Platinum. Then there are some Nouveau glitter accents. These ones are called Silver Jubilee, and there is a sparkle spray, and the colour on this is Apple Spritz. There are 3 Nouveau alcohol markers, and the colours on these, they're called Parma Violets, and we'll take a closer look at those in a moment. First of all, I want to show you the sparkle spray. You need to give this a little shake to get the ingredients sort of distributed throughout your little spray, and then this is how it comes out. I've sprayed this onto black cardstock and white so that you can see the difference and the variation, and it gives a really good spray of colour. Sometimes when you use a colour spray there's a little circle in the middle because the spray is in a ring around the outside of the tiny nozzle. Not so in this case. You get a really full centred splat of colour, and it's glorious when you see it like this twinkling away. The next thing I want to show you is how well the embossing powder works with the embossing ink. To do that I have to give away some of the stamps that are included in the folder, which I haven't yet shown you, but in there are these 2 rather pretty flower stamps, and this is how they look when they are inked and embossed on white cardstock and black cardstock. And I've added some of the little glitter accents just to give you an idea of how they look as well on both of those different colours. I'm going to hang on to this piece of white cardstock because it will help me show you the Nouveau pens. These come in 3 colours: Lavender Sky, Wild Iris and Blueberry Muffin. In addition to having the numbers on the lids of the pens, these also have, it's an extra little bit of protection to stop the lid coming off, but it has the barcode on it as well as a colour and the number. Now what I've done on these 2, because I wanted to keep that information on the side of the pen, is I've cut off the barcode, and these are not one of those adhesives that is impossible to remove. It actually comes away quite easily. So I've just pulled back the barcode and got my scissors and cut it away, and that way I can keep the names of the pens, that little information on the side of the pens there. So let's start with Lavender Sky. I'm going to use the bullet end of this one just to show you how the colour comes out. So that's the Lavender Sky. The next one is the Wild Iris, and on this one I'll show you with the sort of pointier end how that applies. And finally the Blueberry Muffin. It goes on beautifully quickly, really smoothly. All of those colours work together beautifully. So these are the dies, and to show you what they do, I've already cut some of these out. To begin with, there is a large oval and there is a small oval. Maybe if I do it this way you can see the difference in sizes, and they can be used on the outside of some of the dies and on the inside of some of the dies. So here's an example of one of the dies. What's nice about this is that it's symmetrical, and we may play around with that symmetricality. Is that a word? We might play around with that aspect of that die later on. We might not, I don't know yet. Then this is the same shape, this one here, but this time I've used the larger die to cut out the middle, so that what you have is a frame. It's worth pointing out that there are 2 different halves of dies in the folder. Let me show you. Here, this die is a slightly different shape and design to this die. So when you're cutting these out, you cut one side here, and then you turn it over and you cut another side there, and that way you get a full size design. This is one of the smaller dies. It creates the most beautiful little frame with some lovely delicate little filigree elements on the inside. Alternatively, you can, this is slightly squint, bear with me, alternatively you can cut from a piece of paper so you have a frame embedded within your piece of paper. And that's the same with this die again. So you could have this cut from a piece of card without cutting away the frame. So there are two different ways that you can cut your dies. This is a really elegant little die. This one says sending hugs, and it has a mat as well which you can cut out. I've cut this out of a contrasting colour to make it easier for you to see. But the white die is really very, very delicate. These little connecting pieces here are really very fine. Here we have a different sentiment. This reads All My Love, and the mat I've cut from black card to make it easier for you to see that one as well. Finally, I've cut the two flowers. I've stamped and then I've cut them out. I haven't done it terribly carefully, I must admit, but that gives you an idea of how they can look as well. So for our first card, I want to use some mousse to highlight the texture of the card underneath my oval. This is the oval that I cut out and I showed you earlier, and I'm using it here to help me decide exactly how much mousse I need to put on my card, because if I don't need to fill a space, I won't. I want to make sure I cover enough of the card to accommodate the oval die cut. I'm going to use the outer oval and the inner frame to cut just the frame from this piece of cardstock. Then I've taken another piece of purple cardstock which I've folded in half to create a card base, and I'm going to cut just the frame from that piece. And finally I'm cutting one of the sentiments from that beautiful white pearlized card. This is a really intricate die and it's beautiful. I've used this on quite a few of my cards because I was really quite taken with it. So here's the assembly. I've got some Nouveau glue which I've transferred into a fine nozzle bottle because I've got quite a few little delicate fronds that I want to try and glue into place. To do this I'm using dots of glue. I'm not putting down a line of glue, it's just little dots because then there's less glue to splat everywhere. And I'm using some stamp blocks just to help me push that down into place and glue it. You can see the nice effect of the mousse on our frame. And now I'm adding a little bit of glue to the reverse of my sentiment die. And this is going to go in the centre of the inside of my card. I'm closing the card so that it will help me position it accurately. And then when that's stuck in place, and again I'm using one of my stamping blocks to help me make sure it's glued down properly, then I've got a lovely card that's got the sentiment that shows through the outside, but of course when you open the card the sentiment is there too. Now I have a lavender Versacolour ink pad, and I'm using this to ink up 2 of the large flowers and 5 of the smaller flowers. I've got some of the embossing powder and I'm just going to sprinkle this over the top, and then I'm going to heat set everything. And this is how they look when they're heat set, and there's one that I burnt a little bit. I'm going to colour each of the flowers using the 3 Nouveau marker pens, and my technique is to use the palest colour all over the flower, then I add a little of the medium colour, and then finally some little dots of the darkest colour in the centre. And I completely forgot that there were dies available to cut these out, and so I cut each of these out by hand. Hopefully you won't forget that. I wanted to add some dimension with my flowers, so I've taken my scissors and I'm cutting just down into the centre, only maybe 3 or 4 cuts into the flower, and then I'm going to use one of my pokey tools to roll the petals around the tool. Only some of them. I'm leaving a flat area because that will make it easier for me to glue my flowers onto my project. I'm going to set them to one side while I carry on with the rest of my card. Now I've taken a large white piece of card which measures 6.5 by 5.5, and I'm going to open this out and I'm going to use the largest oval to help me position one of the half oval die shapes. I'm using the oval to make sure that I get this in exactly the right position, and I'm using a couple of pieces of washi tape to secure it in place before I run it through my die cut machine. Obviously this is too big to go through a Sizzix. I'm using a cut and boss. I've replaced the oval and I'm using that to help me position the lower half of the half oval die cut. And when that's gone through the machine a second time, I pop all the pieces out and I'm left with a really beautiful frame that's cut into my card. I've taken two pieces of the smallest frame and I've cut them from some of the buff green and some of the mirror card green, and I'm going to glue one of these on top of the other. Again, I'm using tiny little dots of glue, and then I'm going to add both of these to the inside of my larger oval. I've positioned these so that one is slightly offset against the lower one, and I'm using my stamp block again to help make sure they're glued down securely. I've also cut out one of the sentiments, and again I'm going to position one on top of the other and glue it down, slightly offset against the one below. And I've overemphasized this for the sake of the card. It might make it easier for you to see on the screen. And I'll glue that down into the centre and squash it down again with one of my stamp blocks. All I need to do now is go back to my flowers and glue those into position on the lower left hand side of my oval. And that's my card complete. I think that's quite elegant. I think it looks quite Edwardian. For my third card, I'm using the flowers again. I have a clear embossing pad and I'm going to stamp these flowers all over my background purple card. Once the card is covered, I'm going to take the embossing powder and I'm going to sprinkle it all over the flowers. Because this is only a little jar, I'm going to do this in two sections. So I do the first half of the card and I catch all of the embossing powder on a little bit of paper, and then I scoop the embossing powder back into the little pot, bring my purple card back in and sprinkle the second half. And then I'm going to heat set everything, but I'm going to do that off camera just in case I burn it again. This is how it looks when it's heat set. Absolutely beautiful, plenty of shimmer. Now I'm going to cut one of the sentiments from the pearlized card and the mat that goes behind it from the purple mirror card. I've got a white top folding card and I'm going to begin to assemble all my pieces. I've cut a couple of strips of the mirror card, actually 3 strips of the purple mirror card. One of those strips is going to go down the extreme right hand side, and then I'm going to use my lovely shimmery flowery card with some craft foam on the reverse to give it a little bit of dimension, and I'm going to glue that down so that it will slightly overlap the mirror card on the right hand side. Then I'm going to take the narrow strips and I'm going to glue those down the left hand side. I'm just going to decide exactly how far over on the left hand side of the card I need them to be. I'm going to glue the widest one down on the extreme left, and then I'll add the thinner one on the other side of that. Once they're both glued down, there will be a little bit hanging out of the bottom, and I'm just going to trim that away with my scissors. I'm going to add some glue to the reverse of my layered sentiment. I'm going to glue that onto the front of the card. And once again I'm going to use one of my stamp blocks to hold that sentiment down in position on my card until the glue is dry. And with that, my card is complete. For my final card, I've used that beautiful green shimmer to spray down a piece of white card, which I've then cut into the shape of a tag. And I've done the same with a couple of the other bits of card. And I've also taken black ink and stamped one of the sentiments onto the white pearlized card. I've taken the brown piece of textured card and I've folded it in half to make that my card base. And now I've added the tags to the front of the card and I'm going to cut off the excess. I want to add the sentiment, but I want to add another backing to it, so I'm going to glue it onto the front of the embossed brown card. I'm going to stick it down and then I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to cut a very fine border around the outside of my sentiment. I'm going to take a piece of craft foam and I'm going to stick that to the reverse of my sentiment because that will give it extra dimension, and then I'm going to glue it down onto my card. And with that, my card is complete. I'm going to say thank you very much for watching, thank you for your time. I'm going to leave you with some close-ups of all of the cards that we've made today along with a little music, and until we meet again, take care.